Okay, that's really good progress, but we only have 24 hours left before 1 week of frost. Hi everyone, welcome to Making Over My Garden episode 2. Last episode was all about moving in and spreading up some topsoil so we could prepare a lovely planting area at the back, but also assessing the space and understanding where we would create flower beds and beautiful displays. So today we're going to work on the front garden. It took me a little while to figure out what I wanted to do because the planting here is going to be a little bit different from your standard. You have a fence and then build from that. Because we have those beautiful open views and also cows that graze on the neighboring fields. And now it's time for planting. Actually, yesterday I started by measuring the area, making sure I love the layout, separating all my different areas and placing some pots. We've created some sort of walkway with this central rose here, and then here we're flanked by 2 lilacs and here 2 roses, and then we basically have 4 quadrants that I'm going to plant a little bit differently, but each will have a centerpiece. So here the apple tree, over there another rose, here I have another lilac, and over there I think I'm going to plant an hydrangea. I checked the weather forecast and we have, I think, about now 24 hours before 1 week of frost. So it is now high time to get plants into the ground. So we'll see what I can get in the ground. Otherwise, not sure what will happen. The main idea here is that we're going to have a rectangular bit of planting with this beautiful rose as a centerpiece. And then we have 4 quadrants basically that bring a little bit of symmetry and also play with the fact that this is a rectangular garden. For now it requires vision, but I think it's going to look like a cottage garden at the end, but just with a bit of a more formal arrangement. So we have to plant everything and do it fast because we have 1 week of frost approaching and also some snow on the forecast. So if I don't get the perennials that right now have been sitting bare root at the front of the house in the ground, then the chance of survival is really low. And that's the same for spring bulbs. If I don't get them in the ground, then digging freezing earth is going to be really difficult or near impossible. So we have to do as much progress as we can today. I didn't have a lot of time to come up with the design because we were, settling in and finishing the move, but I knew I had to work with some constraints. So first was to be able to reuse all of the plants that we lifted from the previous garden so that they don't go to waste, but also because I love them and I wanted them to have a new home. The second was making sure those plants would go in an area of the garden where they would get the right amount of sun. So for us, it's in the back garden. We have an east-facing garden, so this area of the garden gets a good dose of morning sun, which is perfect for most of the plants that I'm putting there, or at least will keep them happy enough. Okay, now that I know what I'm planting and where, the big question still remains about how. And I knew that I had to leave a gap in between the fence and my planting because we have livestock grazing in the fields around us, some cows and some sheep, which apparently are very good at nibbling the plants that are too close to the barrier, so we had to leave a good distance. Also, I wanted really easy access with my garden cart so that I could still access all the plants for maintenance and just also to move around in the garden. And I'm keeping here a really wide walkway so that we can use the garden cart all around. And with all of that done, we were left with a rectangular area of about 4 meters deep over, I think, 7 meters long. And this is the area where the entire garden has to go for now before the frosts arrive. In cottage gardens, the planting is typically informal, so you mix a lot of different plants, they're planted closely together. You can have a color themes of pastel tones, but you also see a lot of bright colors. It's really personal preference. Traditionally, you also have edibles, so you would have herbs, you would have vegetables that are also combined with flowers. Today you don't see as many vegetables in cottage gardens, but that could be something that we bring in. You also typically use very natural materials, so things like wood and willow, and sometimes upcycle elements as well, so that you have that cottage and informal vibe. It can look a little bit untidy and unruly, but there's still a lot of thought and planning that goes into selecting the plants. You typically see things like aquilegias, foxgloves, roses, delphiniums, a lot of pink, some poppies, sometimes little patches with wildflowers. It's a really beautiful mix. So this is definitely the look that I want for the garden. So I ended up choosing a design with 4 squares and a central focal point. In the center of each of those 4 quadrants, I also chose a focal point as a container so that it would draw your eye and also bring that symmetry. Also, some of those container grown plants are some of my biggest and also most beautiful plants. I have roses, lilacs, and apple tree. So I thought that would, well, not only those are perfect cottage plant, but also that brings a bit more height and still gives you that traditional layered look. I also wanted to invite the entry through the garden. So we have 2 axes to cross the garden. Also, I used some containers to flank those entry and exit points. Again, I think that regardless of which way you're going to traverse the garden, that guides you. And over here another lilac. And then I used 2 roses here to flank the main walkway from the planting areas. That will give us a beautiful avenue. And then over here I have 2 lilacs. So I've tried to bring a little bit of symmetry. And then yesterday I was basically playing around with those plants, you know, kind of like placing them and see where everything's going to go. I've changed my mind actually, and over here around the rose, I think I want the rose campion instead of the lamb's ear. They have this beautiful silvery foliage and are going to produce really bright pink magenta flowers, which apparently is the color of the year according to Pantone. So that's perfectly on trend without meaning to do that. The plant that I had the most of was the lamb's ear that completely exploded. I used to have it in the tin vase planter at the front of the house, and it grew really well, let's say. So I ended up dividing all of that and using it to line all the walkways. I just used bamboos and a twine to basically make sure my lines were straight when I was planting. So I ended up separating all the individual little plants, and we're going to have lamb's ear lined walkways. I think that's going to look really beautiful, and in the end I opted to put the rose campion in the center. I think that will make more sense. Each of those normally has still a strong set of roots, so we'll see. They might not all take, but that will be easy to replace. I grabbed some twine and 2 bamboos. Let's go. And then I just placed all the other perennials that I had, some grasses. I also dug up some artichokes at the allotment. I also planted some osteospermums. And I have still my little sedum in a container. I have some hellebores that I replanted, some foxgloves that I moved from our front garden meadow. Just a jumble of cottage plants. So yesterday, very late and very much in the dark, I finished planting the garden here. And of course, in the morning we had our first frost. So I'm hoping everything is going to survive. So right now I still need to take care of my spring bulbs. Basically, I only planted the big tub. Those are all the pots. I still have so many pots like this. See, with the old compost, basically mostly where I had my dahlias, actually. There's another little clump here. Here's the beautiful display that we created. So far, so good, even with the frost. This morning, the glass was frosted. It was beautiful. So basically, this is the situation there. We still have a few hostas there that I really need to get into the ground. But all those containers here will get some spring bulbs. So what I wanted to do was reuse that old compost as mulch. I ended up using a bubble wrap to try to protect the pots and the bigger root balls. Just secured with some tape. The garden is suffering. Cottage gardens also traditionally have some spring bulbs, so some tulips, alliums, everything in between. So I wanted to add some alliums and some iris in one of the quadrants. I had this idea that we could have some beautiful grasses and then those towering alliums. I don't know if the grasses are going to survive, but we can add the alliums. All right, so here are a few more things I want to plant today. I still have a few bits from Taylor's that I haven't planted. So we have 5 purple sensation alliums, 6 Artropurpureum, 1 Mount Everest, that's going to be lovely, some irises, I really love the color of these. And then I also have some more alliums and some more iris. Yes, you can still plant spring bulbs in January. It's your last moment to do so. The bulbs need a period of cold in order to flower properly, so don't plant too late. For alliums and irises, because they flower in May, June, I think January gives us plenty of time. Let's plant up. So I'm just laying out the bulbs. I think they're going to be very beautiful. So they go all around the container. Those are more spring bulbs that I had protected from the frost. And then I think I wanted to add some stepping stones in here. And then this is how you enter the garden. Actually, I'd like your advice. What would you use as edging to separate the planting from the pathway? Would you plant an edge? Would you use some wood in some form? Just let me know. I'd love your opinion on that. We still have a little bit of time to get that planted before spring finishes, so that would be good to know. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out the next episode of our garden makeover series, and I'll see you next time. Bye!